Have you ever cast your favorite lure 100 times, dragged it perfectly through the best cover on the lake, and gotten absolutely nothing, but the exact second you put your rod down to take a bite of your sandwich, your rod nearly gets yanked into the water? We love to call that bad luck or just a funny coincidence, but what if I told you it has absolutely nothing to do with luck? What if I told you that in those exact moments, nature was screaming at you that a feeding window was opening and you completely missed the signals? Today, we are going to break down the one undeniable sign from nature that signals the bite is about to turn on. I promise you, once you understand this sudden, strange shift in the environment, you will never look at a quiet lake the same way again. In fact, you will probably realize why you have been getting skunked on days when you should have been hauling in personal bests. Do you really think fish just randomly decide to eat, or is there a switch that gets flipped? Let us find out. This topic is absolutely critical because the vast majority of anglers out there are operating on autopilot. You wake up at 4 in the morning, drink a terrible cup of bitter gas station coffee, and rush to the water because you firmly believe the old saying that fish only bite at the crack of dawn. You tie on the same lure you have used for the last 5 years, you stand in the exact same spot, and you repeat the exact same motion over and over again. When the fish do not bite, you blame the cold front, you blame the muddy water, or you just assume the lake is fished out. We have been conditioned by old traditions and outdated advice to believe that fishing is just a waiting game, a game of pure chance. But that mindset is exactly why so many guys sit on buckets for 8 hours, catching nothing but sunburns. We get stuck in our routines and forget that fish are wild animals. They do not wear watches. They do not care what time your grandfather said is best. They operate strictly on environmental triggers. And if you do not know how to read the background context of the wild world around you, you are basically fishing blindfolded. Picture this exact scenario. You are sitting by the edge of the water and the sun has been beating down on your shoulders for the last 4 hours. You have thrown every single lure in your massive tackle box. You have tried the deep diving crankbaits, the weedless soft plastics, the noisy topwater frogs, and even that weird glowing thing you bought on clearance last winter. Absolutely nothing is working for you today. The water in front of you is completely dead, looking like a giant, polished sheet of glass. You start thinking about packing up your expensive gear and heading home early to mow the lawn, completely convinced that the fish have simply locked their jaws for the day. You remember your grandfather confidently telling you that fish only feed at first light, and since it is now early afternoon, you figure your chances are completely gone. This is exactly where 99% of fishermen make their absolute biggest mistake. They let the boredom take over and they stop paying attention to the living environment around them. They retreat into their own heads, frustrated and defeated, missing the incredible signals happening right in front of them. Let us talk about the modern traps that keep us from seeing what is right in front of our faces. We live in an age where almost every single fisherman has a supercomputer right in their pocket. You probably have 3 different weather applications, a digital lunar phase calendar, and a complex tidal chart all loaded up and ready to go. On top of that, many of us have boats rigged with advanced fish finders that cost more than our first cars did back in the day. We spend our valuable time staring down at high-definition glowing screens, watching little colorful arches swim by, trying desperately to force a bite based on digital information. We become completely obsessed with the electronics. But here is the harsh, uncomfortable reality that nobody wants to admit out loud. While you are staring down at your expensive sonar screen trying to decipher if that red blob is a massive bass or just a sunken log, the real world is happening right above the water. A digital screen simply cannot tell you that the humidity in the air just spiked drastically. By relying so heavily on technology, we have completely detached ourselves from the natural world we are trying to conquer. To really understand this, you need to understand the biological chain reaction that happens in every single body of water. Fish do not just randomly decide they are hungry and want a snack. Their feeding is deeply tied to the lowest levels of the food chain. It all starts with the microscopic plankton and the tiny insects. When the atmospheric conditions shift even slightly, these tiny organisms react immediately. They move up or down in the water column. When the microscopic food moves, the small baitfish follow them instantly, and when the nervous little baitfish start moving and schooling up near the surface or the drop-offs, the large predators notice immediately. The big bass, the walleye, the pike, they are perfectly tuned, killing machines that wait for the baitfish to make a mistake. So when you are standing there waiting for a bite, you are not just waiting for one fish to find your lure. You are actually waiting for an entire ecosystem to shift its behavior all at the exact same time. If you can learn to spot the signs of the bottom of the food chain moving, you will know exactly when the monsters at the top are about to start their violent hunt. The granddaddy of all natural indicators is the atmosphere itself, specifically the barometric pressure. Now, I know that sounds like a boring science lesson, but stick with me here because this is the absolute secret weapon. Fish have an incredible organ called a swim bladder, which helps them control their buoyancy in the water. But this swim bladder also acts like a highly sensitive internal weather barometer. When the air pressure above the water drops even by a fraction of a degree, the pressure on the water and consequently on the fish decreases. Sudden drop in pressure actually causes their swim bladders to expand slightly. It makes them feel physically lighter, more energetic, and incredibly aggressive. It is like they just drank 3 cups of strong coffee. They know instinctively that a low-pressure system usually brings rain or wind, which will wash food into the water and stir up the bait. They feel this change hours before the first dark cloud even appears on the horizon. Your weather application might tell you a storm is coming tomorrow, but the fish feel the pressure dropping right now, and they know it is time to gorge themselves before the heavy weather hits. This brings us to the primary, undeniable sign that a massive feeding window is about to burst wide open. I call it the eerie silencing. You know exactly what I am talking about if you have spent enough time outdoors. You are standing by the lake, and there has been a gentle, steady breeze all morning. The birds have been chirping in the trees behind you, and the frogs have been making their usual noise along the muddy banks. Then suddenly, everything simply stops. The wind dies completely, leaving the water perfectly flat. The birds go completely quiet. Even the annoying insects seem to disappear into thin air. It is a strange, heavy, almost suffocating calm that descends over the entire area. Most amateur anglers hate this moment. They think a dead calm means dead fishing, but they could not be more wrong. This sudden, heavy silence is nature holding its breath. It is the immediate physical manifestation of a sharp drop in barometric pressure. The animals on land go quiet because they sense the atmospheric shift. This eerie calm is your 5-minute warning bell. It is the universe telling you to grab your rod tight because the predators underwater are waking up. What does the average weekend angler do during this crucial, heavy silence? I will tell you exactly what they do. They get incredibly bored because the wind stopped and the water looks like glass. They assume the fishing has shut down completely. They put their rod down on the grass. They walk back to their truck to grab a sandwich or pour another cup of coffee from their thermos. They pull out their smartphones and start scrolling through social media, looking at pictures of other people catching fish. They decide this is the perfect time to sit down, relax, and take a break. It is almost comical how predictable human nature is. Right at the exact moment when the biological dinner bell is ringing loud and clear underwater, the fisherman decides to take a nap. And then, 20 minutes later, when they finally pick their rod back up, the golden window of opportunity has already slammed shut. The feeding frenzy happened while they were busy eating a ham and cheese sandwich. If you feel the wind completely die and the woods go dead silent, that is not the time to rest. That is the time to stand up, check your knot, and prepare for absolute chaos on the water. Almost immediately after that heavy, suffocating silence, the second phase of the sign occurs. It is the sudden micro-breeze. After 5 or 10 minutes of dead calm, you will suddenly feel a tiny, almost imperceptible puff of cool air hit the back of your neck. It is not a strong wind, just a subtle shift in the air current. You look out over the perfectly flat water, and you see a small, dark patch of ripples forming on the surface, slowly moving toward you. That tiny ripple is the visual trigger that breaks the stalemate. You see, when the water is perfectly flat, the sunlight penetrates straight down, making it very easy for baitfish to see predators approaching from below. The big fish know this, so they hold back and wait. But the exact second that micro-breeze hits the water and creates a ripple, it shatters the surface tension. It breaks up the light, creating a massive camouflage curtain overhead. The big bass and the aggressive pike use this sudden broken light as their ultimate cover. As soon as that ripple moves over a weed bed or a drop-off, the predators use the shadows to launch their ambush. That dark patch of nervous water is exactly where you need to cast. We need to take a moment to brutally destroy one of the most stubborn myths in the entire fishing world, the myth of the perfect, sunny day. Ask any guy who rarely fishes what the best weather is, and he will tell you it is a bright, warm day with clear blue skies and 0 clouds. We call these bluebird skies, and any serious angler will tell you that bluebird skies are an absolute nightmare. After a major cold front passes, the sky clears up, the sun beats down brightly, and the barometric pressure skyrockets. This high pressure literally pushes down on the fish. It makes them lethargic, sluggish, and completely glued to the bottom or buried deep inside heavy cover. Their eyes are sensitive to the intense, unbroken sunlight. Yet you see hundreds of guys out on the lake on these perfectly sunny days, dragging baits around, wondering why they cannot buy a single bite. They curse their luck. If you want to catch big, aggressive fish, you should be actively praying for those dark, threatening clouds. You want the overcast days, you want the sudden weather shifts. Breaking the habit of only fishing when the weather is comfortable for you is the first major step to becoming a highly successful angler. If you want to know what the fish are doing, you need to stop staring at the water for a second and start looking at the sky. I am talking about reading the birds. Birds are the absolute best, most reliable fish finders on the entire planet. They do not run on batteries, and they never lie to you. If you are standing on the bank and you see a great blue heron wading in the shallows, watch its body language carefully. If the heron is just casually walking around, the baitfish are relaxed. But if that heron suddenly freezes like a statue, stretches its neck out tight, and stares intensely into the water, you need to pay attention immediately. That bird sees a school of nervous baitfish being pushed toward the shore by a larger predator. Even better, watch the small seagulls or swallows darting over the middle of the lake. If they are flying high and scattered, nothing is happening. But if you suddenly see a flock of birds diving down, swooping aggressively right above the surface of the water, they are picking off fleeing baitfish, and those baitfish are fleeing because a massive school of predatory fish is attacking them from below. Cast into the diving birds and hold on tight. Let us dive deeper into the behavior of the baitfish themselves. Most people look at the water and just see a big puddle. They do not notice the subtle movements happening right on the surface. You need to learn the critical difference between relaxed, happy baitfish and absolutely terrified, nervous baitfish. On a slow day, you might see small minnows casually swimming in little circles near the shore, occasionally creating tiny, gentle rings on the surface. See, that means the predators are resting. But right when the pressure drops and the bite is about to turn on, the baitfish change their behavior completely. You will start to see what old school guides call a shimmer or nervous water. It looks like 1,000 tiny needles quickly poking the surface from underneath. The baitfish will swim in erratic, tight, flashing movements. Sometimes you will see a tiny spray of water as a handful of minnows violently jump entirely out of the water. They do not jump for fun. They jump because something much bigger and much faster is opening its mouth right behind their tails. If you spot that nervous, shimmering water, you have found the active strike zone. This natural signaling system is not just limited to still lakes and ponds. If you are fishing a river or moving water, the signs are just as critical, but they show up differently. In a river, the fish are heavily dependent on the current to bring food directly to their faces. Sometimes the bite is completely dead because the current is too slow or too steady. But nature has a way of changing things in an instant. A sudden shift in the wind direction can push against the main current, creating a temporary eddy or new current seam. Or a sudden influx of water from a small storm miles upstream can slightly alter the flow. When this happens, the surface of the river will suddenly look different. You will see bubbles gathering in new circular patterns. You will see small leaves or debris suddenly spinning in a spot that was moving perfectly straight just 10 minutes ago. This sudden change in the flow disrupts the hiding spots of the baitfish and washes insects off the banks. The big trout, smallmouth bass, or walleye will immediately move to the edge of this new current seam to intercept the confused prey. Spot the changing current and you spot the feeding fish. There is a massive psychological trap that catches even experienced anglers when things get tough. It is the overwhelming urge to move. We call it running and gunning. You fish a spot for 30 minutes, you get no bites, so you pull up the anchor or jump in the truck and rush to a new spot. You repeat this all day, constantly moving, constantly searching. But here is the brutal irony of running and gunning. Often, right when you decide a spot is totally dead and you start reeling in your line to leave, the environment is just beginning to enter that eerie silence phase we talked about earlier. You turn your back, start your loud engine, and completely destroy the area right as the pressure drops and the feeding window is about to open. By constantly jumping from spot to spot, you are always out of sync with nature's rhythm. Sometimes the absolute smartest and most difficult thing you can possibly do as an angler is to force yourself to stay put. If you know a spot holds good structure and you feel the weather getting heavy or the wind shifting, do not leave. Sit down, be quiet, and wait for the natural sign to trigger the fish. Recognizing the sign is only half the battle. The other half is knowing exactly how to adjust your presentation the absolute second that the environment shifts. Let us say you have been slowly dragging a soft plastic worm across the bottom for 2 hours because the fish are acting lethargic. Suddenly the wind dies, the birds stop singing, and then that dark micro breeze ripples the surface. You see a spray of nervous baitfish near a fallen tree. If you cast that slow, dragging plastic worm back into that chaos, you are likely missing out on the true potential of the moment. When the predators get triggered by the pressure drop, they switch from passive scavengers to aggressive, reaction-based hunters. This is the exact moment you need to reel in as fast as you can and tie on a reaction bait. Grab a loud spinnerbait, a flashy spoon, or an aggressive topwater lure. You want to match the chaotic, fast energy of the fleeing baitfish. You want a lure that causes a massive disturbance and triggers a pure, instinctual strike. The fish are no longer inspecting their food closely. They are simply trying to kill anything that moves quickly through their territory. Let me paint a very vivid picture of a real-life scenario so you can understand exactly how fast this happens. It is 2 in the afternoon on a hot summer day. You are standing on the front deck of a boat, sweating completely through your shirt. The water is totally stagnant. You are practically falling asleep standing up, ready to call it a day. Then you notice a subtle change. The leaves on the massive oak trees along the shoreline suddenly flip over, showing their lighter undersides. The temperature drops maybe 2 or 3 degrees in a matter of seconds. You feel a cool rush of air hit your face. You grab your rod, point it toward the edge of a lily pad field, and fire a cast perfectly into the shadows. Your lure hits the water, and before you can even turn the handle of your reel, the water explodes violently like someone just dropped a cinder block from a helicopter. A massive bass absolutely destroys your lure, pulling drag so hard your wrists hurt. That exact fish had been sitting under those lily pads for 6 hours, refusing to eat a single thing. but the exact moment the temperature dropped and the leaves flipped, a biological switch turned on in its brain. That is the power of the natural sign. Another brilliant, undeniable sign from nature is the sudden emergence of the insect hatch. Now, a lot of guys think insect hatches only matter for fly fishermen chasing little trout in mountain streams. That is a massive misconception that costs people giant fish. Think about the food chain again. When a specific type of aquatic insect decides to hatch and rise to the surface in the millions, it creates a massive disturbance. Suddenly the water is covered in tiny dimples, like a light rain is falling on a sunny day. The small panfish, the bluegills, and the sunfish lose their absolute minds. They swim to the surface in massive schools, recklessly splashing and gorging themselves on the helpless bugs. They get so completely distracted by the feast that they forget they are supposed to be hiding. Guess who is watching from the deep dark water below? The giant predatory bass and the massive pike. They do not care about the tiny insects, but they care deeply about the 100 distracted bluegills splashing on the surface. If you see a sudden insect hatch start dimpling the surface of the water, you need to cast a large baitfish profile lure right underneath that surface chaos immediately. We need to talk about the danger of trusting your grandfather's catchy little rhymes over your own two eyes. Every angler alive has heard the old saying, "Wind from the east, fish bite the least, wind from the west, fish bite the best." People treat this simple little rhyme like it is an unbreakable law of physics. They will wake up, check the wind direction, see it blowing from the east, and simply refuse to go fishing. While it is true that an eastern wind often accompanies a high-pressure cold front which can make fishing tough, it is a massive oversimplification. Localized micro-weather changes will always trump general seasonal rules. You might have a steady eastern wind all morning, making the bite miserable. But if a localized afternoon thunderstorm starts building just over the nearest hill, causing the wind to suddenly die and the pressure to plummet, those fish are going to feed aggressively, completely ignoring the fact that the wind was from the east an hour ago. You cannot rely blindly on old cliches. You have to read the exact conditions happening directly in front of you at that specific moment in time. The fish are reacting to the now, not the daily forecast. So, how do you actually train yourself to become observant enough to catch these fleeting moments? It requires a complete reset of your behavior on the water. The next time you arrive at the lake or the river, I want you to do something that feels incredibly unnatural for a fisherman. Do not immediately grab your rod. Leave your gear in the truck for a moment. Walk down to the edge of the water, find a comfortable rock, sit down, and simply shut your mouth. Put your phone on silent and shove it deep into your pocket. Take off your sunglasses for a minute to see the true colors of the water. Just watch and listen for 15 straight minutes. Look at how the current is moving. Watch the birds in the trees. Listen for the sound of frogs or the sudden splash of a jumping fish. Feel the direction of the wind on your face. By taking just 15 minutes to calibrate your senses to the natural rhythm of the environment, you will notice things you have completely ignored for decades. You will suddenly see the current seams, you will notice the nervous water, and you will feel the pressure. You will transform from a guy just blindly throwing pieces of plastic into the water, into an actual apex predator, hunting with intent. Here is a sign that almost nobody talks about, and it sounds completely crazy until you experience it yourself: the smell of the water. Yes, I am totally serious. You need to use your nose. Water generally has an earthy, slightly muddy scent. But when a massive school of predatory fish suddenly pushes a huge ball of baitfish toward the surface and starts tearing through them, the dynamic of the water changes violently. As hundreds of baitfish are injured or eaten, they release oils, scales, and blood into the water. If the wind is blowing slightly toward you, you will suddenly smell a very distinct, oily, musky, almost overwhelmingly fishy scent hit the air. It smells like crushed watermelon or oily sardines, depending on the type of baitfish. Many veteran offshore saltwater guys know this trick, but freshwater anglers completely ignore it. If you are casting into a quiet cove and suddenly a strong, oily fish smell washes over you on the breeze, you need to be on high alert. That smell means a massacre is happening just upwind from your location. Follow the scent, find the nervous water, and you will find the most aggressive fish in the entire lake. The actual cost of ignoring these natural signs is massive. Think about how many fishing trips you have taken where you casted your arm off for 6 hours, caught absolutely nothing, and drove home feeling frustrated and defeated. You blamed the lake, you blamed the lure colors, you blamed the weatherman, and you told your buddies that the fish were just not biting today. But the brutal, honest reality is that there was almost certainly a 20 to 30-minute window during those 6 hours where the conditions shifted perfectly. The pressure dropped, the birds went silent, the wind changed, and the dinner bell rang loudly underwater. The fish were absolutely biting, but you were just busy tying a different knot, complaining to your buddy, or staring at your expensive sonar screen. Missing that brief magical window means the entire 5-hour trip feels like a total waste of time. But if you can learn to recognize the signs, you do not need to fish frantically for 6 hours. You can fish relaxed, wait for the environment to give you the green light, and then maximize your effort during that 30-minute window of absolute chaos. It changes the entire game. Ultimately, becoming a truly successful angler requires a massive shift in your perspective. You have to stop viewing yourself as an outside visitor trying to trick the fish with plastic toys and expensive electronics. You need to realize that the moment you step up to the edge of the water, you are instantly a part of that specific ecosystem. You cannot force a wild animal to be hungry, and you cannot force a fish to eat a lure when its biological instincts are telling it to rest. However, you can make sure you are perfectly positioned with your rod tight in your hands, completely focused. The exact second nature flips the switch. When you learn to respect the eerie silence, when you start looking for the nervous water, and when you finally understand the massive power of the atmospheric pressure drop, you will unlock a level of fishing success you never thought possible. You will stop relying on luck, and you will start relying on thousands of years of natural biology. The signs are literally everywhere, every single time you go out. The only question left is, are you finally going to open your eyes and pay attention to them? Let us bring this all together. The ultimate takeaway is that fishing is not a random game of chance, and you do not need to rely solely on expensive technology or outdated grandpa myths to find success. The most powerful indicator in the world is that eerie, heavy silence followed immediately by a sudden micro-breeze that ripples the surface. That is the barometric pressure dropping, the food chain moving, and the predators waking up to feed. When you recognize that moment and switch your presentation to match the aggressive energy, you will turn a totally dead day into the best fishing trip of your life. It changes your entire approach from blind hoping to strategic hunting. Thank you so much for watching. If this video gave you a new perspective on reading the water, please hit that subscribe button, leave a massive like, and share it with your fishing buddies. Now, I want to hear from you. Drop down into the comments right now and let me know, what is the absolute weirdest sign from nature you have ever noticed right before you caught a monster fish? Let us get a great discussion going below.